The Commonwealth night smelled of wet ash and old friction. "Hold position." The command was a whisper, but it carried the weight of military authority. Paladin Dance knelt in the mud, the servos of his T-60 power armor adjusting with a low hydraulic groan. The rain beaded on his steel pauldrons, mixing with the rust that bled from the rivets. His laser rifle was trained on the darkness of the tree line. Next to him, Dogmeat whined, a high, thin sound vibrating in the German shepherd's throat. The dog's ears were pinned back, hackles rising like a stiff brush along his spine. "He hears it too," Nick Valentine murmured. The synth detective leaned against a rusted jersey barrier, tipping his fedora down to shield his mechanical eyes from the drizzle. His synthetic skin was peeling at the jawline, revealing the clockwork gold of the gears beneath. He lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating his yellow, pupilless eyes. "Something's putting the spook in the air, Blue, and it ain't the Institute." Nora, the sole survivor, adjusted the strap of her combat rifle. She watched the Geiger counter on her Pip-Boy. The needle was dancing. Tick, 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 tick. "Atmospheric disturbance," Nora said, her voice tight. She scanned the sky. The heavy clouds, usually a suffocating gray, were bruising purple. "High altitude, coming in hot." "Vertibird?" Dance asked, scanning his HUD. "I'm not reading a transponder code." "Too fast for a bird," Valentine drawled, exhaling smoke that smelled of sulfur. "Look up." The sky tore open. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a pressure wave. The clouds parted as if sliced by a razor, revealing a streak of cobalt fire. The object didn't fall. It drove itself into the earth. It screamed, a binary shriek that shattered the glass in the nearby red rocket station windows. Krakoom. The impact occurred 300 yards east in the dried-up riverbed. The ground jumped. Nora felt the shock wave punch through the soles of her boots. Dogmeat barked, a frantic, sharp sound lost in the roar of the explosion. Dust and steam geysered up, painting the night in a sudden, violent orange. "Contact!" Dance roared. "Weapons free! Flanking formation!" The squad moved. They were a machine forged in the chaos of the Wasteland. Dance took point, his heavy boots crushing the asphalt. Clank, clank, clank. Nora moved low, using the debris for cover. Valentine brought up the rear, his submachine gun drawn, his movements fluid but unmistakably synthetic. They reached the ridge overlooking the crater. The heat was intense. It rolled off the impact site in waves, smelling of ozone and melting tar. In the center of the smoking pit, something was moving. It wasn't a super mutant. It wasn't a Deathclaw. It was metal. But not the clunky, riveted steel of the Brotherhood, nor the white, sterile plastic of the Institute. This metal was alive. Plates of vibrant, scorched yellow shifted over a chassis of complex alien geometry. The figure, a giant, easily 18 feet tall, was trying to stand. It stumbled, a massive three-fingered hand digging into the dirt for support. Dance didn't hesitate. "Abomination! Target the power core!" "Wait!" Nora yelled, grabbing Dance's steel arm. The giant froze, its head a helmeted dome with wing-like protrusions, snapped toward them. The optics ignited, two glowing blue circles. They widened, the aperture ring spinning with a sound like a camera shutter focusing. "Was it?" The giant raised its hands. Not in attack, in panic. It looked at Dance's power armor. It looked at Nick's exposed gears. It looked at Dogmeat. Identification. The voice was a burst of static, then a hard cut to a pre-war radio jingle. "Nuka-Cola, it's the real thing!" Dance faltered. It's mocking us." "No," Nick said, stepping forward, his trench coat flapping in the thermal updraft. "It's trying to talk. Look at the eyes, Paladin. "There's a ghost in the machine!" The giant B-127 took a step back. His foot crushed a rusted Corvega sedan flat as a pancake. He looked down at the wreckage, startled. He looked back at the squad. He pointed at Dogmeat. Dogmeat didn't growl. The dog trotted forward to the edge of the crater, tail wagging slowly, sniffing the air. The smell of the alien wasn't rot. It was clean energy. B-127 tilted his head. He ventured a low subharmonic chirp. "Woof," Dogmeat barked back. B-127 mimicked the sound perfectly. "Woof." "I'll be damned," Nick chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "He speaks dog." "It is a tactical deception," Dance insisted, his laser rifle humming as the capacitor charged. "It is unknown technology. It is a threat to the Brotherhood." B-127 heard the hum of the weapon. His door wings flared. His combat mask slid into place, snick, covering the expressive blue eyes with a jagged metal visor. He scanned the environment. He needed camouflage. His optics locked onto a billboard nearby, a faded advertisement for a Zip 500 micro coupe. Yellow, round, fast. He looked at his own body. He looked at the squad. Whir clank, grind. The transformation was visceral. It wasn't magic. It was engineering. Panels flipped, gears locked, mass compressed. In the span of 3 seconds, the 18-foot giant folded itself inward, collapsing into a dense, compact shape. The air pressure normalized. The giant was gone. Sitting in the bottom of the crater, amidst the smoke and ruin, was a battered yellow compact car. Silence settled over the squad. The rain began to hiss against the hot metal of the car's hood. Dance lowered his rifle, the weapon dipping in genuine confusion. "Where did it go?" Nora stood up, holstering her weapon. She walked down the slope, sliding on the scree. She approached the yellow car. The engine was idling, a strange pulsing rhythm that sounded more like a heartbeat than a combustion cycle. She reached out, her hand hovering over the warm metal of the hood. "Nick," she whispered. "Yeah, boss? I think we just found something that doesn't belong in the history books." The radio in the yellow car crackled to life. A knob turned by itself. "I don't want to set the world on fire." The ink spots crooned, the volume low, trembling and apologetic. Dogmeat sat down next to the front tire and licked the hubcap. The convoy rolled into Sanctuary Hills under the cover of a deluge. B-127, still locked in the guise of the yellow micro coupe, was not driving under his own power. He was being towed behind Nora's fusion-powered truck, a heavy chain wrapped around his front bumper. His suspension sagged. The crash had rattled his gyro stabilizers, and his internal diagnostics were screaming in a loop of red text. Critical failure, fluid leak, Sector 7. Stealth mode, compromised. They pulled into the main carport, the one with the yellow crafting workbench that Sturgis used to pound scrap metal into slightly more useful scrap metal. The moment the engine cut, the vultures descended. Piper Wright was there before the wheels stopped rolling. The reporter from Diamond City leaned against the doorframe, her red leather trench coat dripping wet, a press cap tilted jauntily over her eyes. She had a pencil behind her ear and a hunger in her grin. "Blue, you've brought home stray dogs, stray mutants, and a synth detective," Piper quipped, gesturing with her notebook. "But a pre-war compact with a custom paint job? Is this your midlife crisis? Because the headline Vault Dweller trades power armor for pothole magnet is writing itself." Nora jumped out of the truck, wiping mud from her face. "Not now, Piper. Clear the bay. I need Sturgis, and get Curie." "Curie?" Piper's eyebrows shot up. You need a medic for a car? Okay, now I'm definitely taking notes. Sturgis slid out from under a pile of tires. The grease-stained mechanic wiped his hands on a rag, eyeing the yellow car. He whistled low. Clean lines. Suspension is shot to hell, though. Where'd you find parts for a Zip 500 out in the glowing sea? It's not a Zip 500, Nick Valentine rumbled, stepping out of the shadows, his trench coat heavy with rain. He patted the yellow hood. And it's not a car, Sturgis. Careful where you poke it. Curie floated into the garage. The modified Miss Nanny bot, now inhabiting a synthetic human body with a severe French bob cut, bustled in carrying a medical bag. She looked confused, her brown eyes scanning the room. Madame, you requested medical assistance? Curie asked, her voice clipped and precise. I do not see a patient, unless Mr. Valentine has rusted his knee joint again. The patient, Nora said, pointing at the yellow car, is the car. Sturgis laughed. Good one, General. I'll get the wrench. No wrenches, Nora snapped. Curie, scan it. There's a leak under the chassis. Tell me what it is. Sturgis frowned, his mechanic's intuition tingling. He knelt by the front wheel. He reached out to touch a jagged scrape on the fender. The metal flinched. Sturgis scrambled back, crab-walking on his heels, knocking over a toolbox. Clang, crash. Whoa, it moved. The metal shivered. Fascinating, Curie whispered. She didn't recoil. She stepped closer, pulling a stethoscope from her bag, a ridiculous tool for a machine. But she operated on instinct. She placed the bell against the hood. She closed her eyes. It has a heartbeat, Curie murmured. 140 beats per minute. Rhythmic, hydraulic, yet organic. B-127 couldn't hold the disguise perfectly anymore. The pain in his abdominal strut was blinding. A hiss escaped his undercarriage, a vent of steam that smelled of ozone and hot sugar. A pool of fluid began to spread on the concrete floor. It wasn't the iridescent rainbow of oil. It was glowing. A bright neon blue that illuminated the dark garage like a chem light. Look at that, Piper whispered, forgetting to write. It's bleeding antifreeze. Curie knelt, dipping a finger into the glowing puddle. She rubbed the fluid between her thumb and forefinger. She brought it to her nose. This is not coolant, Curie announced, her scientific demeanor hardening into focus. It has a viscosity similar to plasma, but the molecular structure is alive. It is carrying oxygen. It is blood, madame. High energy, conductive blood. Preston Garvey stood at the entrance, his laser musket at port arms. He looked tired. General, the settlers are getting spooked. They say the car is humming at them. Mama Murphy is in her chair muttering about the yellow devil if this thing is dangerous. It saved us, Nora said. She looked at the yellow hood. Didn't you? B-127 heard her. He felt the hostility in the room, the weapons, the fear, the analyzing probes. But he also felt the curiosity in the French scientist and the protection from the woman in the blue jumpsuit. He needed to communicate, but his vocal processor was still offline, scrambled by the atmospheric entry. The radio dial on the dashboard spun. The static hissed, loud and abrasive, making Piper jump. Do you really want to hurt me? Culture Club wept through the speakers. Do you really want to make me cry? Piper's jaw dropped. She looked at her notebook, then at the car. Did the hatchback just quote 80s pop at me? It is in distress, Curie said, standing up. Sturgis, I need the laser cauterizer and platinum. Do we have platinum? Platinum, Sturgis stammered. I got copper and steel, maybe some gold in the watches. It will have to do. Curie turned to Nora. The wound is deep. If we do not seal it, this entity will bleed out. Nora walked to the front of the car. She placed her hands on the hood, right over the Autobot insignia, which was currently disguised as a manufacturer's logo. "We're going to help you," she said softly, "but you have to work with us. Can you let us in?" The garage went silent. The only sound was the rain and the drip, drip, drip of the blue blood. Slowly, with a sound like a heavy vault door unlatching, the hood popped. It didn't just open, it unfolded. The engine block wasn't an engine. It was a rib cage of interlocking metallic plates, pulsing with blue light. In the center, beneath the armor, the spark chamber glowed, a swirling vortex of energy that made the lights in the garage flicker and dim. Codsworth, the floating Mr. Handy butler, drifted in from the kitchen with a tray of mutfruit tea. He saw the exposed alien heart. "Good heavens," Codsworth gasped, dropping the tray. "Mum, the car has a soul, and it appears to be terribly constipated." "It's a power core," Dance said, stepping out of the shadows, helmet off, face grim. "And it's critical. If that breaches, this entire settlement becomes a crater." "Then help us fix it," Nora ordered. "Sturgis, get the welder. Curie, tell me where to cut. Piper, write this down." Piper grinned, the fear gone, replaced by the thrill of the story. "Way ahead of you, Blue. Sanctuary Hills, first contact. Or maybe the day the highway hit back." B-127 lay there, his internal systems watching the chaos. He cycled his radio again, finding a soft acoustic track. "Lean on me when you're not strong." "We're trying, buddy," Sturgis muttered, flipping down his welding mask. "Just don't explode, okay?" B-127 vented a puff of steam that sounded suspiciously like a sigh. The sun dragged itself over the horizon, painting the Commonwealth in deceptive pastels of peach and bruised purple. In the center of the cul-de-sac, the yellow Zip 500 sat parked beneath the great oak tree. The welding scars on its chassis were fresh, ugly gray patches of lead and steel against the vibrant yellow paint, like bandages on a prizefighter. Nora sat on the porch of her pre-war home, a chipped mug of Slocum's Joe coffee warming her hands. She watched the car. "It hasn't moved in 6 hours," Nick Valentine rasped, leaning against the railing next to her. The synth detective was tossing a capsized heavy washer in his hand like a coin. "Maybe Curie cooked its brain pan with that laser." "Curie said the core stabilized," Nora replied, blowing steam off the coffee. "It's resting or hiding." "Hiding," Nick agreed. "Smart kid. In this world, standing out gets you scrap-heaped." Across the street, Mama Murphy sat in her custom-built chair, her clouded eyes fixed on the yellow machine. She wasn't rocking. She was vibrating, a low, constant tremor in her hands. "The metal has a voice, kid," Mama Murphy muttered to Preston Garvey, who was patrolling the perimeter. "Not a radio voice. A sky voice. It sings about the stars." Preston adjusted his hat, looking uneasy. "Mama, please, no more chems. We have enough trouble with a mysterious alien tank in the driveway." "No chems today, Preston," she whispered. "Just the energy. It tastes like lemon drops and lightning." Suddenly, the air in the cul-de-sac changed. The smell of the bacon frying at the communal fire pit was abruptly overpowered by a sharp, metallic tang. The scent of a thunderstorm trapped in a bottle. Ozone. The yellow car's headlights flickered. Whoa! The engine revved, but the wheels didn't move. The vibration rattled the windows of the nearby houses. "He's waking up," Nora said, setting her coffee down. B-127 had been running a Level 3 diagnostic in sleep mode. System repairs, 72% complete. He felt cramped. The vehicle mode was a cage. His gyro servos ached from being folded into a 2-ton origami block for 8 hours. He needed to stretch. He checked the optical feeds. The humans were calm. The weapons were holstered. He decided to risk it. Ku-chunk. Clack. Hiss. It started with the doors. They didn't open. They detached, sliding upward on hidden rails. The hood split down the center. The front tires rotated inward, vanishing into the chest cavity. Preston Garvey dropped his laser musket. Whoa, whoa. The transformation was a ballet of heavy industry. B-127 unfolded, rising from the asphalt like a flower made of iron. He kept going up, 12 feet, 15 feet, 18 feet. He towered over the oak tree. He stretched. It was a terrifyingly human gesture, arms reaching up to the sky, back arching, a deep resonant groan of metal plates shifting. Steam vented from his lumbar struts, blowing the morning mist away in a swirling vortex. He looked down. The residents of Sanctuary were frozen. Sturgis had dropped his wrench. Piper was frantically scribbling, her mouth agape. B-127 realized his mistake. He was too big. He was a titan in a village of ants. He quickly hunched over, retracting his door wings, trying to make himself smaller. He brought his hands together in an apologetic clasp. He looked at Nora. His radio cycled. He needed a greeting, something friendly, something local. "Good morning, Vietnam!" Robin Williams screamed from his chest speakers. B-127 flinched. Wrong. Too loud. He smacked his helmet. "Here comes the sun. Do-do-do-do." The Beatles. Softer. Better. Mama Murphy stood up. It was a struggle for her, her old bones creaking. But she walked right up to the giant's foot. "Mama, get back!" Preston yelled. She ignored him. She looked up at the blue optical sensors. "You're far from the hive, little bee," she rasped. "You lost your queen." B-127 froze. His optics zoomed in on the old woman. She saw him, not the metal, him. He knelt, the movement causing a small earthquake in the driveway. He brought his face down to her level. He chirped, a soft, inquisitive binary trill. "I see the fire coming," Mama Murphy said, her eyes rolling back, the white overtaking the iris. "Not from the sky this time, from the ground, the green giants and the gunners. They want the honey." Crack. The sound of a gunshot tore through the morning peace. It came from the bridge. Preston's radio crackled. "Perimeter breach! North Bridge! We got bogies! Lots of them!" B-127 stood up instantly. The "Here Comes the Sun" track cutting out with a record scratch. Nora grabbed her rifle. "Stations! Everyone to the wall!" She turned to B-127. "Can you fight?" B-127 looked at the bridge. Through the mist, he saw them. Gunners. A militarized mercenary company. They had an assaultron. They had a missile launcher. And behind them, hulking shapes in the mist, super mutants leashed like dogs. B-127 didn't answer with a song. His right arm shifted, the hand retracted. The plasma caster slid forward, locking into place with a heavy, menacing clack. The blue light in the barrel began to whine, rising in pitch, harmonizing with the fear in the air. Nora grinned, racking the bolt of her rifle. "I'll take that as a yes." The mist on the bridge didn't swirl. It parted. Something invisible was sprinting through it. Nora leveled her combat rifle on the wooden barricade. "Stealth unit, watch the shimmer." B-127 stood by the great oak, his battle mask locked down. His HUD was flooding with red target reticles. The primitive chemical weapons of the humans, gunners, were crude, but the energy signature rushing the bridge was familiar. High voltage, close combat. "Targeting!" Preston Garvey shouted, cranking the handle of his laser musket. He fired. A red beam lashed out, burning a hole in the mist. It missed. From the empty air, a metallic shriek erupted. Screar! The Assaultron decloaked mid-leap. It was a nightmare of black metal and red lenses, its sword arms spinning like blender blades. It wasn't aiming for the humans. It was aiming for the biggest threat. It hit B-127 in the chest. Clang, spark. The impact pushed the 18-foot bot back a step. The Assaultron clung to B-127's chest plating like a spider, its blades grinding against his yellow armor, showering the cul-de-sac in sparks. "Get it off him!" Piper yelled, firing her 10mm pistol wildly. The bullets bounced off the Assaultron's casing harmlessly. B-127 didn't panic. He was a scout. He was built for grappling. He reached up, grabbing the Assaultron by its narrow waist. The droid thrashed, its head laser charging, a rising red glow. Zet! The head laser fired. B-127 jerked his head to the side. The beam grazed his helmet, scorching the yellow paint black and melting the weather vane on top of the nearby house. B-127 squeezed. Crunch. The Assaultron's waist armor buckled. B-127 ripped the droid off his chest and slammed it onto the asphalt. Before it could recover, he deployed his arm blade, orange thermal energy crackling, and drove it down. Shunk! He severed the robot's head. The body convulsed, sparks spewing like a fountain before going limp. "Incoming! 12 o'clock!" Dance roared from the roof of the workshop. On the far side of the bridge, the gunner heavy weapons team had set up. A gunner commander in heavy combat armor knelt, shouldering a triple-barreled missile launcher. "Fire!" Thump, thump, thump. 3 missiles spiraled through the air, trailing gray smoke. B-127's combat processor slowed time. He couldn't dodge. The missiles would hit the house behind him, the one where Mama Murphy was sitting. He moved forward. He didn't transform into a car. He transformed his arm. The plasma caster retracted, his hand folded back. A circular shield generator deployed from his forearm, spinning up with a high-pitched whine. Wub, wub, wub. A translucent blue energy barrier expanded, covering his front. The missiles hit the shield. Boom, boom, boom. The explosion was massive. Fire engulfed the bridge. Shrapnel pinged against the energy barrier, rippling like stones thrown into a pond. B-127 slid backward 3 feet, his heels digging trenches in the pavement, but the shield held. The smoke cleared. B-127 stood amidst the burning debris, the blue shield fading. The gunner commander stared, lowering his launcher. "What the hell is that thing? Brotherhood tech?" "No," his lieutenant stammered, looking through binoculars. That's not us. That's not Institute. That's..." B-127 didn't wait for them to figure it out. He raised his left arm. He flipped a panel on his gauntlet. A grapple hook shot out, a magnetic harpoon attached to a titanium cable. Zing. It flew across the river, 60 yards in a heartbeat. It slammed into the gunner commander's missile launcher. Clang! The magnet locked. B-127 yanked the cable back. Whoa! The commander was jerked off his feet, dragged violently across the bridge, tumbling over the railing and splashing into the shallow, irradiated water of the river. The remaining gunners, 6 of them, plus 2 super mutant hounds, wavered. Nora stood up from behind the barricade. She looked at B-127, then at the terrified mercenaries. "Last chance," she yelled, her voice echoing over the river. "Run or the big guy starts playing the heavy metal!" B-127 got the cue. He cycled his audio deck, maximum volume. "Welcome to the jungle. We've got fun and games!" Guns and roses blasted from his chest speakers, loud enough to shake the leaves off the trees. B-127 revved his internal engine, stomped his foot, and vented steam. He deployed both arm cannons, one plasma, one sonic. The super mutant hounds whimpered, tails between their legs. They bolted. The gunners looked at the giant musical robot, then at their swimming commander. They broke rank. They ran, scrambling back into the woods, leaving their equipment behind. B-127 cut the music. Silence returned to Sanctuary, save for the crackle of burning bushes and the groans of the wet gunner in the river. Preston Garvey lowered his musket. He looked at B-127 with wide eyes. "Okay, I'm glad he's on our side." Dance jumped down from the roof, landing with a heavy metallic thud. He walked up to B-127, looking at the severed assaultron head on the ground. "Effective," Dance grunted, crossing his arms. "Reckless, but effective. The Brotherhood could use a machine like you. Ad Victoriam." B-127 tilted his head. He looked at Dance, then mimicked the salute, bringing a massive metal hand to his brow. "At ease, soldier." A clip from a World War II movie played. Nora walked up, patting B-127's knee. "Good job, big guy, but that noise? You just rang the dinner bell for everything in the Commonwealth." Mama Murphy leaned forward in her chair, lighting a cigarette. "Not everything, dear. Just the ones who are hungry for the new lightning." B-127 looked at the horizon. His sensors picked up a faint, rhythmic pulsing from the south. A signal, not Autobot, not Decepticon. Something else, something old and hungry, deep in the glowing sea. The red rocket station was a skeleton of the old world, but it had good bones. Sturgis had turned the garage bay into a triage center for the alien. B-127 sat on the hydraulic lift, which was groaning in protest under his weight, while the mechanic worked on his lower leg servos. "Hold still," Sturgis muttered, tapping a wrench against a stubborn strut. "You got a piece of gunner armor wedged in your gyro. If I pull this, you're gonna kick." B-127 gripped the edges of the lift, his metal fingers digging into the steel. He vented a nervous hiss. Curie hovered nearby, holding a clipboard, which she didn't need but liked for the aesthetic. The structural integrity is fascinating. His alloy is self-healing, but it requires energy. He is hungry, Monsieur Sturgis. "Hungry?" Piper asked, sitting on a stack of tires eating a box of sugar bombs. "Like he wants a Brahmin steak?" "Like he needs fusion cores," Nora said, walking in from the Wasteland. She dropped a heavy canvas bag on the workbench. Clunk. "I raided the stashes at Concord, 4 cores. That should top him off." B-127's optics brightened at the sight of the glowing yellow canisters. He reached out, his movements fluid despite the damage. He picked up a fusion core between 2 massive fingers. It looked like a AA battery in his hand. He didn't install it. He looked at it, then at Nora. He chirped, a soft, ascending scale. "Go ahead," Nora smiled. B-127 opened a panel on his chest. He slotted the core in. Vroom! The sound wasn't an engine starting. It was a power plant coming online. His blue optics flared with intensity. The yellow paint on his armor seemed to saturate, becoming vibrant and glossy. The dents from the missiles popped out with metallic pings. He stood up, shaking the dust off his shoulders. He felt good. He felt charged. Dogmeat barked, running circles around the giant's feet. B-127 knelt and carefully, with infinite precision, scratched the dog behind the ears with one metal finger. Dogmeat's leg kicked in delight. "He's a softy," Piper grinned, writing in her notebook. "The Iron Giant with a heart of gold. It's a bit cliché, but the readers in Diamond City eat that slop up. Dance, standing guard at the door, wasn't smiling. He is a weapon of mass destruction acting like a pet. It is undignified and dangerous. If the Institute finds a way to hack his command protocols— He's not a synth, Dance, Nick Valentine interjected, lighting a cigarette. No code to hack. He's got a ghost. You can't hack a ghost. B-127 turned to Dance. He sensed the tension, the rigid posture, the fear masked as discipline. B-127 stood up and walked over to the power armor soldier. He looked at Dance's T-60 suit, bulky, rusted, stiff. Then he looked at his own sleek, transforming limbs. He pointed at Dance, then at himself. He made a transforming motion with his hands. Dance scowled. What? No, my armor does not do that. B-127 tilted his head. He played a sound clip. Anything you can do, I can do better. The garage erupted in laughter. Even Preston cracked a smile. Dance stiffened, his face turning red. This is a mockery of Brotherhood engineering. It's a joke, soldier, Nora said, patting Dance's pauldron. Lighten up. We're on the same team. Suddenly, B-127 went rigid. The laughter died. His head snapped toward the south. His door wings flared out. His optics zoomed, staring through the garage walls, through the hills, toward the horizon. He didn't play a song this time. He emitted a low, guttural growl that vibrated the tools on the workbench. What is it? Nora asked, grabbing her rifle. Gunners coming back? B-127 shook his head. He pointed a finger at the map on the wall. He traced a line from Sanctuary past Lexington, past Diamond City. He tapped the location of the glowing sea. Then he made a gesture. Two fists crashing together. War. Something big is waking up, Nick murmured, ash falling from his cigarette. And I don't think it wants to play fetch. B-127 looked at Nora. He transformed his arm into the plasma caster, then back to a hand. He was asking for permission to hunt. Nora looked at her team. The reporter, the synth, the soldier, the mechanic. Load up, she said, racking the bolt of her rifle. If it's coming from the sea, we're going to need more than just good vibes. Dance, prep the vertibird signal grenades. We're going for a ride. B-127 transformed. Whir, clank, grind. The yellow coupe sat idling in the driveway, the passenger door popping open for Nora. Get your motor running, Steppenwolf growled from the dashboard. Head out on the highway. The convoy moved through Lexington like a funeral procession. B-127, in his yellow coupe mode, took the lead. Nora sat in the driver's seat. Though she wasn't steering, the wheel turned under her hands with a ghostly precision, avoiding potholes that would have snapped a human axle. Dogmeat panted in the passenger seat, nose pressed against the glass. Behind them, a battered military transport truck, piloted by Dance with Nick and Piper in the back, rumbled along, its engine coughing smoke. The radio in B-127's dashboard scanned the frequencies, skipping over the classical station. Into each life, some rain must fall. The ink spots, melancholy, fitting. Too quiet, Nora whispered, her hand resting near the door handle. She looked up at the Corvega plant looming overhead, a massive industrial cathedral of rusted pipes and smokestacks. The ghouls usually swarm here. Where are they? Hiding, Nick's voice crackled over the shortwave radio. Or something scared them off. Keep your eyes on the rooftops, Blue. They entered the kill box. It was a narrow underpass, the road flanked by high concrete walls topped with chain-link fences. Shadows pooled deep here. Clang. A bear trap snapped shut on the road, but B-127 swerved milliseconds before impact. Then the lights came on. red lasers, dozens of them. They crisscrossed the underpass like a spiderweb originating from the catwalks above. "Contact!" Dance shouted. From the shadows of the catwalks, figures emerged. They were nightmares of the Wasteland, rust devils, raiders wearing armor fashioned from the severed heads of Protectrons and the chest plates of sentry bots. They wore the metal like skin. "Fresh meat!" a voice screeched over a loudspeaker. "Fresh scrap! Strip the chassis!" Thwump, thwump. Two massive magnetic harpoons fired from mounted turrets on the bridge. They didn't aim for the truck. They aimed for the yellow car. The first harpoon slammed into B-127's hood. Crunch! The magnet engaged with a hum loud enough to crack teeth. The second hit his rear bumper. B-127's tires locked. He shrieked, a mechanical scream of pain and surprise. The cables went taut. The rust devils were reeling him in, trying to drag him up the embankment like a caught fish. "They've got him!" Piper yelled, kicking the back door of the truck open. She started firing her pistol, the shots pinging uselessly off the raider's metal armor. Nora kicked the driver's door open. "Let him go!" She rolled out onto the asphalt, bringing her combat rifle up. She took a breath, aimed, and fired. Bang! A rust devil on the catwalk spun away, his jagged armor sparking. But the rust devils had brought their pets. "Kill command, engage!" a flat robotic voice announced. From the drainage pipe, they scurried out. Junk bots, horrific amalgamations of robo-brain tracks, assaultron torsos, and sentry bot arms. They were welded together with hatred and bad wiring. One junk bot, a torso with saw blades for hands, rushed Dance. "Ad Victorium!" Dance roared. He didn't fire. He stepped into the charge, catching the saw blade on his T-64 arm. Sparks showered his helmet. He punched the robot in its glass dome brain case. Splat! Biogel sprayed everywhere. B-127 was struggling. The cables were dragging him sideways. He couldn't transform. The tension was too great. If he shifted now, he'd tear his own chassis apart. He needed slack. "Dog meat, bite!" Nora screamed, pointing at the cable operator. Dogmeat didn't hesitate. The shepherd bolted up the pile of rubble, a blur of fur. He launched himself at the raider manning the winch. He latched onto the man's arm. The raider screamed, letting go of the lever. The cable went slack. Whir clank, snap. B-127 didn't wait. He exploded out of vehicle mode. He transformed mid-air, spinning as he rose. He grabbed the magnetic harpoon still stuck to his armor and yanked. The winches were torn from their mounts, crashing down onto the road. B-127 landed in a crouch, 18 feet of angry yellow metal. His battle mask slid shut. A massive rust devil leader, wearing a suit of power armor made entirely of sentry bot faces, stepped onto the bridge. He wielded a shish kebab, the flaming sword dripping fuel. "Behold," the leader roared, "the golden god! I will wear your face, machine!" B-127 looked at the flaming sword. He looked at the junk bots swarming Nora and Nick. He reached behind his back. Shing! He didn't pull a gun. He deployed his own blade, but not the standard thermal knife. He grabbed the severed steel cable of the harpoon he had just ripped out. He whipped it like a flail. He spun. The cable lashed out, whistling through the air. It struck the supports of the catwalk. Crash! The concrete crumbled. The entire section of the catwalk collapsed, bringing the Rust Devil leader down with it. He hit the asphalt in a heap of sparks and dust. B-127 stepped forward, the ground shaking. He grabbed the leader by his mismatched armor. He lifted him up, staring into the human eyes behind the robot mask. B-127 didn't kill him. He leaned in close. He cycled his audio. "I am Iron Man." Black Sabbath riffed, heavy and distorted. He tossed the leader into a pile of garbage bags. "Clear!" Dance shouted, firing a laser beam that melted a junk bot into slag. The remaining Rust Devils saw their leader thrown like a rag doll. They saw the giant robot playing heavy metal. They saw the Brotherhood Paladin and the crazy woman with the rifle. They routed. Retreat. Save the scrap. B-127 stood in the center of the carnage, the magnetic harpoon still stuck in his shoulder. He reached up and ripped it out with a grunt of static. Scree. He looked at Nora. He vented steam, his optics pulsing rapidly. Nora lowered her rifle. She walked up to him, checking the damage. "You okay?" B-127 nodded. He pointed to the south again. The signal was stronger now, and it was getting angry. The quarry did not look like a mine. It looked like an open wound in the earth, cauterized by fire. At the bottom of the pit, the heat was physical. It pressed against the eyes, blurring the vision. The white marble walls reflected the noon sun, turning the basin into a solar oven. But the Forged, the sadistic raider tribe that worshipped flame and metal, did not hide from it. They stoked it. Blast furnaces roared, belching black smoke that stained the pristine stone. Molten iron flowed in channels cut directly into the rock. Sitting on a throne made of welded rebar and excavator buckets was the Hornet. He wasn't just a raider. He was an industrialist of violence. He wore a suit of patchwork power armor, T, 45 legs, X-01 torso, painted a cautionary wasp stripe yellow and black. He held a heavy flamer in one hand, the pilot light hissing a steady blue threat. "Report," the Hornet grunted. His voice was amplified by a jagged vocoder sounding like grinding gears. A survivor from the Rust Devil ambush, the one B-127 had spared, dragged himself across the hot stone. His armor was shredded. One arm hung limp. He coughed, spitting blood onto the white dust. It wasn't a bot, boss," the survivor wheezed. "It was a car. Then it was a god." The Hornet leaned forward. The hydraulics in his suit groaned. "A god?" "Yellow. Pure yellow." "No, Rust," the survivor stammered, his eyes wide with the trauma of what he had seen. "It moved like water. It had a sword made of fire, but not like ours. Cleaner, hotter, and a heart. A blue star in its chest." The Hornet froze. The Forged lieutenants standing nearby, men and women with burns scarring their faces, wielding shish kebabs and saws, stopped their jeering. "Blue star?" the Hornet asked, his voice dropping an octave. "Fusion," the survivor whispered, "but infinite. It fought the gunners. It fought the devils. It didn't even scratch the paint." The Hornet stood up. He walked down the dais, his heavy metal boots crushing the loose shale. He approached the edge of the pit, looking down into the deepest excavation point. There, resting in the shadow of the quarry wall, was the siege engine. It was a pre-war Bagger 293 excavator, a monstrosity of gears and tracks, the size of an aircraft carrier. The Forged had militarized it. Turrets bristled on its gantries. Cages for prisoners hung from its underbelly. The massive bucket wheel at the front was stained with the blood of settlements it had ground into dust. The Hornet looked at the survivor. "Where did it go?" "South," the survivor gasped. "Towards the sea, tracking a signal." The Hornet turned to his second-in-command, a cruel-eyed woman named Slag. "The glowing sea," the Hornet mused. "Nothing goes there but ghosts and the atom freaks." "If it goes to the sea, the radiation will cook its pilot," Slag spat, sharpening a machete on her leg armor. "There is no pilot," the Hornet growled. "The machine is the pilot, and if it has a core that burns blue, it's worth more than this entire quarry." He turned to the pit. He raised his heavy flamer and fired a burst into the sky. Whoosh! A column of napalm roared 50 feet into the air. "Fire up the drill!" the Hornet bellowed. The quarry erupted. Klaxons screamed. Raiders dropped their scrap and ran to their battle stations. Engines coughed to life, spewing thick diesel smoke. "But boss," Slag yelled over the noise, "the fuel! Taking the drill to the sea will drain our reserves dry!" The Hornet grabbed Slag by her armored collar, pulling her face close to his helmet. "Burn it all," he commanded. "We aren't digging for rock anymore. We're hunting an angel." Below them, the siege engine woke up. Ka-thump, ka-thump. The ground shook. Dust rained down from the quarry walls. The massive tracks began to turn, grinding the white stone into powder. The bucket wheel spun, a hungry metallic mouth ready to eat the world. The Hornet climbed onto the running board of his command truck, a modified war rig welded to the side of the engine. "Point us south," he screamed into his radio, "and bring the Fat Man shells. If God bleeds, we're going to bottle it." The heat in the quarry spiked as 1,000 engines revved at once. The mirage on the horizon shivered, as if the wasteland itself was afraid of what was coming. The canyon felt like a throat waiting to swallow them. The walls rose 300 feet on either side, jagged sandstone teeth that blocked out the late afternoon sun. The air was still, too still. The wind that usually howled through the wastes had died, leaving a heavy silence broken only by the crunch of tires on shale. B-127 in vehicle mode led the column. His internal sensors were screaming. The magnetic interference from the high iron content in the rock walls was creating ghost signals on his radar. Ping, ping, ghost. Inside the cabin, Nora gripped the wheel. She didn't need to steer, the Autobot did that. But the habit was hard to break. Dog meat in the back was whining, pacing from window to window. "He smells it," Nick Valentine's voice crackled over the comms from the truck behind them. "It smells like sulfur and propellant. We're walking into a kill box, Blue." "Keep moving," Dance ordered. "Stopping makes us a stationary target. Eyes up." They rounded a blind corner. The road ended. It wasn't a dead end. It was a wall of fire. A line of flamethrower turrets concealed in the rock face erupted simultaneously. Whoosh! A curtain of napalm sprayed across the road, turning the asphalt into a river of liquid fire. B-127 slammed his brakes. The tires screeched, smoking as he drifted sideways to avoid the flames. "Ambush!" Nora yelled, kicking her door open before the car even stopped. From the cliff edges above, they dropped. The forged. But not the ragtag scrap scavengers from the quarry. These were the elite. The Hornets. They wore T-51 power armor, painted in jagged, aggressive stripes of yellow and black. And they didn't just fall. They descended on pillars of fire. Hiss thump, jetpacks. 6 of them landed in a circle around the convoy. They wielded heavy incinerators and super sledges. "Burn the meat, salvage the metal," their leader screamed, his voice distorted by a vocoder. B-127 didn't wait. Whir-clank grind. He transformed. He exploded upwards, his chassis expanding, plates shifting. He grabbed the nearest forged trooper out of the air mid-descent. He didn't crush him. He threw him. The armored figure sailed into the canyon wall with a sickening clang. But then the heavy hitter arrived. From the firewall ahead, a machine rolled through the flames. It was a sentry bot. But it had been twisted, its cooling vents were welded shut. Its chassis was covered in spikes and trophies. scorched skulls. On its back, a mini-nuke launcher was mounted. "Target acquired," the sentry bot roared, its voice deep and demonic. "Scorched Earth Protocol." It spun its miniguns. Brat! A hail of 5mm bullets shredded the air. B-127 dived in front of Nora and Piper, taking the volley on his shoulder pauldron. Sparks flew like fireworks. His yellow armor chipped and cratered, exposing the protoform beneath. "He's taking too much fire!" Piper screamed, ducking behind B-127's massive leg, returning fire with her 10mm pistol. "He's gonna get shredded!" Dance was engaging two forged troopers with his laser rifle, but he was pinned down. "Bot, use your heavy ordnance, destroy that sentry!" B-127 hesitated. His programming flickered, pacifist protocol active. He raised his sonic blaster. Boom! The concussive wave hit the sentry bot. The massive robot staggered, its wheels skidding, but it didn't stop. It was too heavy. It was too dumb to be scared. The sentry bot righted itself. It ignored B-127. Its sensors locked onto the softer targets. It aimed its missile launcher at the truck, at Nick, at Curie. "Rocket!" Nick yelled. B-127 saw the launch tube glow. He saw the trajectory line in his HUD. It ended in a fireball that would consume his friends. B-127's optics shifted from a soft blue to a piercing combat white. His right arm reconfigured. The sonic blaster retracted. The barrel lengthened. The cooling vents snapped open. The plasma caster. He didn't charge it up. He redlined it. Wash. The sound was the absence of sound. It was a vacuum being created and violently filled. A sphere of superheated, unstable plasma, bright as a miniature sun, erupted from his arm. The canyon went white. The light erased the shadows. It bleached the red rock to colorless ash. For a millisecond, the world was nothing but blinding, absolute brightness. The plasma bolt hit the sentry bot center mass. There was no explosion of parts. There was only sublimation. The sentry bot simply ceased to be solid. The metal turned to liquid, then to gas. The ammo inside cooked off instantly, adding a secondary bloom of fire that was swallowed by the plasma. The heat washed over the canyon floor, a physical wave that singed Piper's eyebrows and blistered the paint on the truck. Then the darkness rushed back in, heavy and purple. The sentry bot was gone. In its place was a glowing crater of glass. Molten metal dripped from the canyon walls, hissing. Hiss, pop, sizzle. The smell hit them instantly. It was the stench of death in the machine age, burning copper, melting insulation, the acrid chemical tang of fried microchips and vaporized plastic. It tasted like battery acid on the tongue. The remaining forged troopers froze. They looked at the hole in the world where their tank used to be. They looked at the smoking barrel of B-127's arm. They didn't fight. Their morale evaporated with the sentry bot. They triggered their jetpacks, fleeing straight up into the sky, trailing black smoke. Silence returned. B-127 stood motionless. His arm was still extended. The cooling vents hissed, glowing cherry red. He slowly lowered his arm. He turned to look at the team. Nora stood up, brushing ash from her jumpsuit. She looked at the crater, then at the giant. "You okay?" she asked softly. B-127 didn't play a song. He didn't offer a movie quote. He looked at his hand, the hand that had just erased existence. He vented a long, low sigh of steam. He turned away from them, walking a few paces down the road. His head hung low. Dogmeat trotted up to him, sitting by his heel. The dog whined. B-127 reached down, slowly, and patted the dog's head with a single finger. But his optics remained dim, fixed on the ground. The innocence of the Zip 500 was gone. The soldier had arrived. The world ended here. The convoy halted at the edge of the blast zone. Ahead, the landscape dissolved into a nightmare of bioluminescent fog and twisted, petrified trees. The radiation storm wasn't a weather event. It was a wall. Green lightning arced silently between the clouds, and the ground itself seemed to pulse with a low, sickening light. Nora stepped out of the truck. She checked her Pip-Boy. Click, 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 click. "Rads are spiking!" she shouted over the wind. 5 rads a second just standing here! We need the suits!" Dance was already helmeted, his T-60 servos whining as he scanned the horizon. This is it, the glowing sea. Even with filtration, extended exposure is fatal for civilians. Piper looked at the green wall, her face pale. She clutched her notebook against her chest. I think this is where I get off, Blue. I want the story, but I don't want to glow in the dark." B-127 stood apart from them. He was staring back the way they came, north toward the canyon. His internal long-range sensors were picking up the vibration. Thump, thump. The siege engine. It was slow, but it was relentless, and it was tracking him. He looked at the team. Nora wrestling a hazmat suit out of the trunk. Nick lighting a cigarette that burned green in the strange air. Dogmeat barking at a rad scorpion scuttling in the distance. They had fought for him. They had bled for him. And if they stayed with him, they would die. B-127 made a decision. He walked over to the truck. He reached down and gently closed the trunk, cutting Nora off from the hazmat suits. "Hey!" Nora frowned, looking up at his masked face. "What are you doing? We need those." B-127 shook his head, a slow, heavy movement. He pointed to Piper. He pointed to the truck. He pointed north, back toward Sanctuary. Then he pointed to himself. And he pointed into the green storm. "I walk a lonely road." Green Day played, soft and acoustic. "The only one that I have ever known." "No," Nora said, her voice hard. "We made a deal. We find the signal together." Nick Valentine stepped forward, his trench coat whipping in the radioactive wind. "He's doing the math, Blue. That warlord isn't chasing us. He's chasing the big guy. If he goes solo, he draws the heat away." "He's right," Dance agreed, though his voice was heavy. "Tactically, it is the sound move. He is durable. He is immune to radiation. You are soft targets." B-127 knelt. He looked at Nora. The battle mask slid back, revealing the blue optics. They were dim, sad. He reached out a massive finger and tapped the Vault 111 number on her jumpsuit back. Home. He was telling her to go home. "I'm not leaving you," Nora said, grabbing his finger. "You saved us at the bridge. You saved us in the canyon. We don't abandon our own." B-127 gently pulled his hand away. He stood up to his full height. The wind howled around him, carrying the dust of the atom bomb. He looked at Dogmeat. He gave a sharp command whistle, a recorded sample. "Stay." Dogmeat sat, whining. B-127 turned his back on them. He didn't transform. The terrain of the glowing sea was too rough for wheels. He began to walk, his heavy feet crushing the petrified roots of the dead forest. "Wait!" Nora yelled. She took a step to follow, but the radiation alarm on her wrist screamed. "Danger. Rads +10/SEC." She stopped, forced back by the invisible wall of poison. B-127 didn't look back. He walked straight into the green fog. His yellow armor began to blur, swallowed by the haze. The lightning flashed, illuminating his silhouette one last time, a lonely giant marching into hell. "He's gone," Piper whispered. "No," Nick said, watching the fade. "He's leading the wolves away from the sheep." Nora stood at the edge of the storm, watching until the yellow speck vanished completely. She clenched her fists. "Dance," she said. "Soldier, get the power armor, the spare suit." "Nora, we're not going home," she said, turning back to the truck. "We're following him. We just need to upgrade first." In the distance, deep in the green smog, a single mournful horn blasted. B-127, acknowledging the separation. And then silence, save for the crackle of the Geiger counter. The glowing sea did not have silence. It had a choir of ghosts. The wind here didn't just blow. It screamed through the skeletal remains of the old world. It rushed through the open muzzles of rusted tank cannons and the hollow rib cages of fallen vertibirds, creating a discordant, flute-like whistling that rose and fell with the radiation storms. Hoo-hoo-s! B-127 limped through the neon fog. He was alone. The green atmospheric haze clung to his yellow armor like a sickness. Lightning, silent and viridian, arced across the sky, illuminating the jagged terrain in strobe light flashes. He clutched his side. The SentryBot's missile splash had compromised his abdominal plating. He was leaking. Drip, hiss. Glowing blue Energon fell from his chassis, hitting the radioactive ash. It didn't mix with the gray dust. It sat there, vibrating, a drop of alien life in a dead ocean. He scanned the horizon. He needed a patch. He needed shielding. He saw it looming in the mist like a buried titan. It was a Liberty Prime unit, or at least the upper torso of one. It had been abandoned during transport centuries ago, half sunk into a crater. The massive steel head, shaped like a football helmet, lay face down in the dirt. One arm reached up toward the sky, fingers rusted into a claw. B-127 approached the giant. He felt a strange kinship, another machine built for a war it couldn't win. He scanned the backplating of the Prime unit. B-127 climbed onto the back of the fallen giant. His metal feet clanged against the hollow hull. He found a maintenance hatch sealed by 200 years of fusion welding and rust. He activated his arm blade, the thermal energy glowing orange against the green sky. Shh. Zzz. He carved a square of plating from the Liberty Prime's shoulder. The metal groaned as he ripped it free. It was heavy, crude, and thick. Perfect for stopping radiation. Perfect for stopping a jagged wound from bleeding out. He pressed the plate against his own side. Wah-ha. He used his internal welders to sear the human steel onto his Cybertronian body. The pain was sharp, a white-hot spike in his neural net, but he didn't cry out. He just vented steam, his optics dimming for a moment. As he finished the weld, his hand brushed against a port on the Liberty Prime's neck. A standard Ropco interface jack. B-127 paused. The wind whistled louder. Ooh, ew, playing the barrels of the tanks around him like an organ. Curiosity. It was his defining trait. It was his curse. He extended a universal data spike from his index finger. He jammed it into the rusted port. Click. The world around him faded. The green storm blurred. Inside his head, the audio file played. It wasn't a machine voice. It was a man, breathing hard. The background audio was filled with sirens and the low rumble of incoming bombers. General Chase, this is Intersection 4. The Prime unit is immobilized. We can't get it to the front. Static, a cough. Look at it. 40 feet of anti-communist steel. It was supposed to save us. It was supposed to be the deterrent. A pause. The sound of a lighter flicking. But the sky is already burning. The metal didn't save us, General. The nukes don't care about democracy. They don't care about the red or the blue. They just erase. The voice cracked. I'm turning the safety off. I'm not going to burn with the rest of them. God help us all. Blam. The audio cut. B-127 yanked the data spike out. He recoiled, almost falling off the chassis. He stood on the back of the dead robot, breathing heavily, venting air. He looked at his own hands. They were weapons, just like this Liberty Prime, just like the Sentry bots. He came from a world that had destroyed itself with war, only to land on a world that had done the exact same thing. War. War never changes. The thought wasn't his. It was a data ghost from the file he had just touched. B-127 looked north, back toward the clean air, toward Nora and the others. He wanted to go back. He wanted to hear music. He wanted to be a car. But then his long-range sensors pinged. Thump. Thump. The vibration was coming through the ground. The siege engine, the Hornet, was coming. B-127 looked down at the crude lead patch welded to his side. It was ugly. It was scarred. But it held the blue blood inside. He wasn't a deterrent. He wasn't a symbol of democracy or tyranny. He was a shield. He jumped down from the Liberty Prime corpse, landing in the ash with a heavy thud. He cycled his radio. No music this time. Just a frequency check. He tagged his own location. He lit himself up like a flare in the dark. Here I am. Come get me. He turned south, deeper into the glowing sea, toward the crater where the bombs fell first. If he was going to fight a war, he would do it in the graveyard, where no one else could get hurt. The center of the glowing sea wasn't dead. It was worshipping. B-127 stood at the rim of the crater of Atom. Below him, a shanty town of rags and lead huddled around a central pool of luminescent slime. The radiation levels here were catastrophic, enough to melt the skin off an unshielded human in minutes. But the children of Atom didn't wear shields. They wore rags. They wore their burns like holy vestments. B-127 slid down the slope of ash, his heavy feet kicking up clouds of gray dust. Figures emerged from the poisonous fog. They were gaunt, their hair falling out in patches, their eyes wide with a feverish, radioactive ecstasy. "Behold!" a voice cried out. Mother Isolde stood by the central pool, leaning on a staff topped with a glowing mini-nuke. "The Atom delivers a messenger, clad in the gold of the morning." B-127 stopped. He towered 18 feet over them. He expected them to run. He expected them to shoot. Instead, they dropped to their knees. "Glory!" they chanted. "Glory to the machine born of the glow!" B-127's optics whirred, zooming in on their faces. He waved his hands frantically. No worship. He pointed back toward the north, toward the horizon where the sky was darkening with smoke. He mimicked the sound of the approaching siege engine. He stomped his foot. Thump! He ground his heel into the dirt. Grind. "The division?" Mother Isolde asked, her smile beatific and toothless. "You bring news of the great division." B-127 played a sound clip, a siren. "Evacuate, evacuate, this is not a drill." He pointed to the cultists, then to the east, away from the path of the Hornet. "Run." Isolde shook her head. "We do not run from the Atom's will, messenger. If the warlord comes to divide us, then we shall become billions of universes." B-127 vented steam in frustration, logic error, survival instinct not found. Suddenly, the rim of the crater exploded. Boom! Dirt and rock showered down on the shantytown. On the ridge above, silhouetted against the bruised sky, stood the vanguard. 3 vertibirds, captured and repainted in the Hornet's yellow and black stripes, hovered over the crater. Ropes dropped. Forged shock troopers in power armor slid down the lines. And with them, dropped the cages. Crash, crash. The cages burst open on impact. Out crawled the rad scorpions. Not the small ones. These were albino monsters, their chitin glowing white, their stingers dripping venom. The Forged had herded them here, driving them into a frenzy with sonic emitters. "Cleanse the pit!" a voice boomed from the lead vertibird. "Clear the landing zone for the drill!" The scorpions chittered, a dry, clicking sound like bones rattling, and surged toward the cultists. The children of Atom didn't fight back. They raised their hands to the sky. "We embrace the sting!" B-127 couldn't let them die, even if they were crazy. He charged. He moved with a speed that belied his size. He intercepted the lead scorpion just as it lunged for Mother Isolde. Thwack! B-127 punched the scorpion. His metal foot connected with the creature's head, shattering the chitin plate. The scorpion flew 50 feet, crashing into a shack. He spun around. 2 more were coming. He deployed his arm cannons. Not the plasma, too dangerous near the nuke worshippers. He used the sonic blaster. Voom, voom. The shockwaves knocked the scorpions onto their backs, legs flailing. "Get behind me!" B-127 broadcasted, using a generic protector bot voice. He grabbed a sheet of corrugated metal from a ruined roof and slammed it into the ground, creating a makeshift barricade for the cultists. Above, the vertibirds circled, their miniguns spinning up. Bert! Bullets rained down, pinging off B-127's back as he huddled over the cultists, shielding them with his own body. He was a yellow mountain in a storm of lead. He looked up at the vertibirds. His optics narrowed. He reached to his shoulder. He popped a flare launcher. Pop hiss. A bright red flare arced into the sky. He wasn't signaling surrender. He was signaling the cavalry. "I get by with a little help from my friends." The Beatles played, distorted by the roar of the rotors. The rim of the crater didn't just break, it liquefied. The siege engine crested the ridge, its massive bucket wheel chewing through the rock, showering the cultist shantytown below in a rain of boulders. It was a cathedral of rust and hate, blotting out the lightning-streaked sky. On the command deck, the Hornet screamed into his vocoder, "Crack the shell! I want the core!" The cargo bay doors on the underbelly of the machine groaned open. Chains rattled, anchor chains, thick as a man's waist. Something roared inside. It wasn't a machine. It was biological thunder. Tiny dropped. The Super Mutant Behemoth hit the radioactive mud with a force that splashed the glowing sludge 50 feet into the air. He was 20 feet of FEV-swollen muscle, his skin the color of a bruised plum. He wore a shopping cart strapped to his back like a rucksack, filled with concrete slabs. His weapon was a rusted fire hydrant welded to the end of a telephone pole. Tiny straightened up, water cascading off his shoulders. He squinted at the yellow machine shielding the ants. "Tiny, smash metal man!" the behemoth bellowed, his voice wet and gravelly. But he wasn't alone. The commotion woke the landlord. From the deepest, most irradiated cave at the bottom of the crater, the ground erupted. A Deathclaw Alpha emerged. It was sleek, horned, and pitch black, with glowing red veins pulsing under its scales. It hissed, tasting the air. It smelled the mutants, it smelled the alien, it hated everything. B-127 stood between the monsters and the praying cultists. He cycled his audio. He needed adrenaline. Thunderstruck! AC/DC exploded from his speakers. the opening riff syncing with the lightning overhead. Tiny charged. The behemoth swung the telephone pole. Thwack! The sound was nauseating. A heavy, wet impact that reverberated in the chest. B-127 crossed his arms to block, but the force lifted him off his feet. He flew backward, crashing through a wooden steeple, landing in the radioactive pool. The Deathclaw shrieked and leaped, not at B-127, but at the behemoth. The two monsters collided in a frenzy of claws and muscle, a chaotic ball of violence rolling through the mud. "Now," a voice crackled over the radio, "hit 'em hard!" The cavalry arrived. Nora's truck vaulted over the crater rim, suspension screaming. Dance, clad in his spare T-60 armor, jumped from the moving bed before it hit the ground. "Haiti Victorium!" Dance roared, his laser rifle spinning up. He unleashed a torrent of red beams into the behemoth's back. Nick Valentine and Piper took up positions on the ridge, providing sniper fire. Dogmeat stayed high, barking orders at the flank. B-127 surged out of the glowing water. The yellow paint on his chest was dented, leaking blue fluid that sizzled against the green slime. He saw the Deathclaw pinning the behemoth. He saw the Hornet on the siege engine, laughing. The Hornet hoisted a bulky olive-drab launcher onto his shoulder, a fat man. B-127's audio receptors picked up the sound instantly. It was the sound of the end of the world. Fwee. The whistle of a mini-nuke. It wasn't aimed at B-127. It was aimed at the Brawl, at the behemoth, the Deathclaw, and the children of Atom cowering behind the debris. Time slowed. B-127 saw Nora firing at the mutants. He saw Dance reloading. He saw the cultists praying to the bomb. He could dodge. He could transform and roll away. He was fast enough. But they weren't. B-127 didn't roll. He sprinted. He tackled the air, diving into the path of the spiraling football. He didn't catch it. He smothered it. He curled his body around the projectile, tucking his knees to his chest, flaring his door wings to create a seal, a cocoon of yellow armor around a nuclear seed. Impact. Krakum. The sound was muted, suffocated by the metal body, but the force was absolute. A sphere of white fire expanded inside his grip. B-127 was blasted upward, a ragdoll thrown by a god. His armor plates shattered. Pieces of yellow metal rained down like confetti. He arced through the green sky, trailing smoke and sparks, and crashed hard into the wall of the crater. The shockwave knocked Dance over. It flattened the shanties. But there was no mushroom cloud, no crater within a crater. The blast had been contained. Silence followed. Tiny the behemoth stood up, confused, shaking dust from his shopping cart. He looked at the smoking heap of yellow metal embedded in the rock wall. "Metal Man break?" Tiny asked. Nora screamed. "No!" She broke cover, sprinting across the mud toward the smoking ruin of the Autobot. On the siege engine, the Hornet lowered the fat man. He grinned beneath his insect helmet. "Crack goes the shell," he whispered. "Go get my prize." B-127 was not a robot. He was a wreck. He'd lay embedded in the obsidian wall of the crater, a mosaic of twisted yellow plating and exposed wire. The mini-nuke had cooked his armor black. Smoke curled from his joints, spiraling lazily into the green air. Nora slid to a halt at his feet, her boots skidding in the mud. She was screaming his name, but the sound was drowned out by the battlefield. Roar. Tiny the behemoth was charging again, swinging his telephone pole like a golf club, aiming for Dance. The Deathclaw was on Tiny's back, shredding the mutant's thick skin, a whirlwind of claws and hate. On the siege engine, the Hornet keyed his mic. Harvest team, cut the pilot out! I want the heart before it stops beating! The massive bucket wheel of the excavator groaned to life. Grind crunch. It began to eat the earth, inching forward to swallow the wreckage of the Autobot. B-127's internal systems were a cascade of red fatal errors. He smelled it before he felt it. A thick, viscous fluid was pooling beneath him. It didn't smell like oil or rust. It smelled sweet, sickly sweet, like hot syrup mixed with ozone. Energon. He was bleeding out. Nora grabbed his hand, a massive, limp finger resting in the dirt. "Get up!" she yelled, firing her rifle one-handed at a forged trooper rushing them. "You didn't come all this way to be scrap!" B-127's optics flickered, a dim, dying blue. He looked at her. He looked at the massive, grinding wheel of the siege engine looming over them, teeth made of rusted steel ready to chew. He couldn't shoot. He couldn't transform. But he could break things. B-127's servos whined, a sound like a dying jet engine. He pushed himself off the wall. Debris rained down. He stumbled, one leg dragging sparks showering from his knee. He didn't run away. He ran at the machine. "Cover fire!" Dance roared, seeing the giant move. "Focus fire on the siege engine's bridge. Buy him time." Dance, Nick, and Piper unleashed everything they had at the Hornet's command deck. Lasers and bullets pinged off the heavy iron plating, keeping the warlord's head down. B-127 hit the siege engine. He didn't hit it with a weapon. He hit it with his body. He slammed into the massive caterpillar tread on the left side. Clang. He grabbed the tread links, steel plates the size of cars, with his bare hands. The tread was moving. It dragged him upward. He dug his feet into the chassis, climbing the moving mountain of rust. "Get him off!" the Hornet screamed, leaning over the railing with his heavy flamer. Whoosh! A stream of napalm washed over B-127. The fire didn't stop him. He was already burning. He punched his hand into the drive mechanism of the front wheel. Strength enhancement max. Structural integrity sacrificed. B-127 pulled. The sound was agonizing. Screech! It was the sound of a ship's keel breaking. It was the sound of industrial steel being asked to do something physics forbade. The drive shaft of the siege engine bent. Then it snapped. Pow W! The massive track derailed. The chain whipped loose, 1,000 tons of steel snake lashing out. It smashed into the bucket wheel, jamming the gears. The entire siege engine lurched violently to the left, grinding to a halt with a seismic shudder that knocked the forged crew off the gantries. B-127 hung from the side of the ruined machine, triumphant. But he was exposed. The Hornet was right there above him, on the maintenance walkway, and he wasn't using a gun. He was holding a Ripper, a handheld industrial chainsaw sword. "Die!" the Hornet shrieked. He swung the Ripper down. It caught B-127's left arm, right at the shoulder joint where the armor had been melted by the nuke. Zzz, grind. The diamond-toothed chain bit into the Cybertronian alloy. It chewed through the protoform muscle. B-127 jerked, his optics flashing white with pain. He couldn't let go. If he let go, the Hornet would reboot the secondary drive. He looked at his arm. He looked at the Hornet. He made a choice. He released the grip of his body, but kept his hand locked in the gears. He kicked off the hull. Gravity did the rest. Snap. There was a spray of blue syrup, a fountain of sweet-smelling Energon. B-127 fell. He hit the ground hard, rolling in the ash. He looked up. His left arm was still hanging from the siege engine, jammed deep into the gears, twitching spasmodically. The Hornet stared down at it, then at the one-armed giant on the ground. The siege engine was dead. The track was stripped. The gears were fused with alien metal. B-127 tried to speak. He tried to taunt. "'Tis but a scratch," he tried to cue. But his vocal processor just emitted a high-pitched squeal of feedback. "Screeks!" The damage had scrambled his voice box. He was mute. He was broken. But the fortress wasn't moving. Tiny, the behemoth, bored with fighting the Deathclaw which had fled the noise, saw the yellow thing fall. "Tiny, finish!" The mutant raised his club over the prone, one-armed Autobot. Crack! A .50 caliber bullet took Tiny in the eye. Nora stood on top of the truck cab, her sniper rifle smoking. "Get away from him, you ugly son of a bitch!" Tiny roared, clutching his face, stumbling backward. "Retreat!" the Hornet yelled from his crippled tower. Seeing his ride immobilized and his heavy hitter blinded. "Regroup at the secondary line! Protect the core!" B-127 lay in the mud, the sweet smell of his own blood filling his senses. He watched the blurry shape of Nora running toward him. He tried to give a thumbs up, but he realized that was the hand he had left on the engine. He just blinked his optics instead, once, slow. The battlefield did not go dark. It went blue. B-127 lay on his back in a crater within the crater. He was a broken toy, discarded by a giant child. His left shoulder was a ruin of shredded servos and fused wiring, sparking rhythmically, zzz, pst, like a dying strobe light. But it was the fluid that commanded the eye. Energon. It didn't behave like oil. It didn't soak into the ash immediately. It beaded up, glowing with a fierce electric azure intensity. It pooled around his yellow chassis, turning the gray dust into a glowing mirror. The smell was overwhelming. It wasn't the copper tang of human blood. It was sweet, sickly chemical sweet, like hot maple syrup mixed with battery acid. It coated the back of the throat and refused to leave. Nora was knee-deep in the blue muck. "Curie!" she screamed, her voice cracking. She pressed her hands against the severed stump of B-127's shoulder. The heat coming off the metal seared her gloves, but she didn't let go. "Get the welder! Use the flamer! Just cauterize it!" Curie floated over, her synth face pale in the blue light. She held a laser pistol, modified for medical sealing, but her hands were shaking. "The pressure is too high, madame," Curie said, her voice tight. "His internal pump, his heart, it is beating too fast. It is pushing the life out of him. If I seal the shoulder, the pressure will rupture the core containment." B-127 looked up at the sky. The green radiation clouds of the glowing sea were swirling, heavy and oppressive. He tried to focus his optics, but the aperture rings were sluggish. The clouds looked like the nebulas of Cybertron. Home. He tried to say it. Whir, click, scree. Nothing but static. The voice box was dead. The movie quotes, the songs, the radio jingles, all gone. He was back to being a mute machine. Piper stood at his feet. She wasn't writing. Her notebook lay in the mud, forgotten. She looked at the blue pool spreading toward her boots. He's leaking everywhere, Blue," Piper whispered. "There's so much of it." Dance and Nick Valentine stood on the rim of the crater, backs to the dying bot, weapons trained on the darkness. "Movement at the siege engine," Dance reported, his voice flat, professional, hiding the strain. "The Hornet is regrouping. They're running repairs on the track. We have maybe an hour before they bring the heavy guns back online." "An hour is 40 minutes more than he's got," Nick rasped. He turned, looking down at the scene. The synth detective's yellow eyes met B-127's fading blue ones. He gave an arm for us. Literally. Nora slipped in the blue mud. She caught herself on B-127's chest plating. She looked at the lead patch he had welded to his side earlier, the one from the Liberty Prime unit. It was holding, but the edges were glowing red. The heat from his core was melting the human lead. "Hey," she said, tapping his chest. "Eyes on me, soldier. You don't get to quit. We took the castle. We blew up the Institute. We can fix a flat tire." B-127 rolled his head to the side. He looked at her. He raised his remaining hand, the right one. It was heavy, the servos whining in protest. He brought a massive finger toward her face. He didn't touch her. He just hovered there, trembling. He blinked his optics, dim, bright, dim, bright. He was scared. Nora saw it. It wasn't the fear of a machine being deactivated. It was the fear of a living thing dying alone in the dark. She stripped off her glove. She placed her bare hand on his giant metal finger. It was hot, vibrating with the chaotic energy of his failing spark. "I'm here," she whispered. "We're all here." Dogmeat whined, crawling onto B-127's chest. The dog lay down right over the spark chamber, resting his chin on the warm yellow metal. B-127's optics widened slightly. The vibration of the dog's breathing synced with the hum of his core. Curie stepped forward. She holstered her laser. She reached into her bag and pulled out something crude, a bundle of stim packs and a bag of Radaway. "It is illogical," Curie said, tears brimming in her eyes. "But his biology is energy-based, perhaps." She jammed the stim packs into the exposed wiring of his shoulder. The chemical sizzled. Hiss. It didn't fix the metal, but the stimulant hit the organic circuitry. B-127 gasped, a sudden intake of air through his vents. The blue light in his optics flared. The leaking slowed, just a fraction, as his internal repair nanites received a chemical kickstart. "It bought us time," Curie said, wiping her hands on her lab coat. "Not much, but some." B-127 lay back. He looked at the group standing around him in the radioactive muck. The soldier, the detective, the reporter, the doctor, the mother, the dog. He couldn't speak. He couldn't play a song. So he did the only thing he could. He transformed his remaining hand. Not into a gun, not into a blade. He shifted the panels until his finger became a small, localized holographic projector, a simple tool for scouting. He projected a beam of light onto the ash cloud above them. It wasn't a map. It wasn't a tactical readout. It was a crude, low-resolution image of a flower. A simple yellow daisy he had scanned back in Sanctuary. The image hovered in the green fog, wavering, flickering, a symbol of life in the land of death. "Yeah," Nora said, wiping a tear from her cheek with a muddy hand. "It's beautiful, big guy. Now rest. We've got the watch." B-127 dimmed his optics to a faint slit. The blue glow of the spilled Energon continued to illuminate the crater, a pool of fallen starlight waiting to be reclaimed by the Earth. The siege engine was no longer a predator. It was a carcass. The massive excavator listed 10 degrees to port, its broken track unspooled like the guts of a roadkill Brahmin. The fires in the boilers had been banked, but the metal still radiated a suffocating, oily heat. On the gantry overlooking the glowing crater, the Hornet sat on a crate of 5mm ammunition. He had removed his insectoid helmet. His face was a ruin of burn scars and grease, illuminated by the sputtering light of a chemical flare. Shker, shker. He held a combat knife in one hand and a whetstone in the other. He wasn't sharpening the blade. It was razor keen already. He was soothing himself. The rhythm was a metronome for his rage. Around him, the surviving Forged huddled in the shadows of the machinery. They were broken. Their armor was scorched, their ammo depleted. They passed a dirty inhaler of jet back and forth, the plastic canister hissing as they took deep, desperate hits to numb the fear. "It took the arm, boss," Slag whispered, leaning against the railing. Her face was gray with ash. "It took the arm and it broke the wheel. We're stuck here. The radiation is cooking us." The Hornet didn't stop scraping the stone. "Shh, Kerr." "It broke the wheel," the Hornet murmured, his voice gravelly from smoke inhalation. "But we broke the shell." He stopped. He pointed the knife at the center of the deck. Lying on a tarp, bathed in the red light of the emergency floods, was the prize. B-127's left arm. It was massive. Even severed, it hummed. The yellow plating was scorched black at the shoulder joint where the Ripper had chewed through. But the hand was pristine. The fingers twitched spasmodically, click-clack, ghost nerves firing in a severed limb. Blue fluid leaked from the stump. Energon. The smell of it filled the command deck. It cut through the heavy stench of diesel and sweat like a razor. It smelled of hot sugar, of ozone, of a battery split open on a summer day. It was intoxicating. The Hornet stood up. He walked over to the severed limb. He knelt. He dipped his finger into the glowing blue pool on the tarp. The fluid was hot. It tingled against his calloused skin, a low-voltage vibration that traveled up his nerve endings. He brought his finger to his mouth. He tasted it. His eyes widened. It wasn't blood. It was raw power. It tasted like licking a live wire. His heart hammered against his ribs, thump, 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 skipping a beat, then racing. The fatigue in his muscles evaporated, replaced by a jittery chemical focus. "Do you taste that?" the Hornet whispered. Slag stepped back, repulsed. "Boss, that's battery acid, and it'll kill you." "It's ambrosia," the Hornet hissed. He stood up, wiping the blue glow on his face, leaving a luminescent streak across his scars. He turned to the cowering raiders. "Look at them down there." He pointed with the knife toward the crater floor, where the faint blue glow of the dying Autobot pulsed in the mud. "They are tending to it. They are patching it with mud and prayers." He walked to the edge of the railing. The wind blew the sweet scent into his face. "It's bleeding out," he said. "The pressure is dropping. The core is exposed." He turned back to the crew. He kicked the empty jet canister across the deck. "Wake up!" he roared. The Forged jumped. "The machine is dying!" the Hornet screamed, his eyes manic, pupils dilated from the taste of the energy. "We don't need the drill anymore. We don't need the tracks. We just need knives." He walked over to the weapons rack. He grabbed a Ripper. He grabbed a heavy sledgehammer. "Strip your armor," he commanded. "Drop the heavy plate. Drop the helmets. We move fast. We move quiet." "Quiet?" Slag asked, looking at the sledgehammer. "Like ghosts," the Hornet grinned, his teeth stained faintly blue. "We go down there and we don't fight the soldier. We don't fight the synth. We ignore the dog." He drove the knife into the wooden crate. Thunk. "We go for the wound," he said, "and we cut the heart out while it's still beating, and then we drink." The Forged looked at him. They looked at the glowing blue blood on his face. They looked at the twitching giant hand on the tarp. The fear in their eyes shifted. It wasn't gone, but it was replaced by something else. Hunger. They stood up. They began to strip off their heavy pauldron plates, dropping them with heavy clangs on the metal deck. They drew their knives. They revved their Rippers. Psst! The sound of the chainsaws harmonized with the ticking of the cooling engine. The Hornet looked down into the dark crater one last time. The sky was breaking. B-127 lay on his back, his chassis half submerged in the radioactive mud. To Nora, the sky was a swirling, opaque ceiling of green smog and lightning. But to B-127, the sky was a glitch. Zzz. The green fog tore open. A hexagon of perfect crystalline darkness appeared in the center of his vision. Inside the hexagon, stars burned, cold, sharp, and unblinking. He wasn't in the glowing sea. He was on the launch pad at Yukon. The mud beneath him didn't feel like sludge. It felt like smooth, cold alloy. The smell of the radiation, that sickly sweet rot, vanished, replaced by the sterile antiseptic scent of pure ozone and energized conductors. He saw towers, spires of gold and chrome rising miles into the atmosphere, connected by bridges of light. They were perfect, symmetrical, mathematical. B-127, a voice rumbled. It was deep, resonant, vibrating in his chest plate like a tuning fork. Optimus Prime. B-127 tried to stand. In the hallucination, he was whole. His arm was attached. His paint was new. He looked up. Prime stood before him, a monolith of red and blue backlit by the twin moons of Cybertron. "Do not grieve for this world," Prime said. "It is a machine. Machines can be rebuilt." Zzz. The hexagon fractured. The green fog rushed back in. Nora was leaning over him. Her face was smeared with soot and blue Energon. She wasn't symmetrical. She was messy. Her skin was scarred. Her hair matted with sweat. Her eyes wide with panic. "Stay with me!" she yelled, slapping his metal cheek. "Don't you fade out, soldier! Nick, I need that stim!" Nick Valentine appeared in the periphery. In the glitch vision, half of Nick's face was missing, revealing the gold gears. To B-127's failing sensors, the synth looked like a Cybertronian stripped of his armor, a raw, exposed soul. "He's cycling, Blue!" Nick's voice echoed, sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "His logic gate is stuck. He's dreaming." Zzzt. Back to Iacon. The golden towers were burning. The Decepticon seekers screamed overhead, triangular shadows blotting out the moons. B-127 looked at his hands in the memory. They were perfect, unblemished, but they were cold. He looked at the ground. There was no dirt on Cybertron, no dust, no chaotic organic life, just metal. Cold, hard, unyielding metal. Even in destruction, it was orderly. The buildings fell in straight lines. The explosions were geometric spheres of plasma. It was beautiful, and it was dead. Zzz. Back to the crater. Dogmeat was licking the Energon off his chest plate. The dog's tongue was rough, wet, and warm. B-127 felt the heat of the animal. It wasn't the heat of a reactor. It was the heat of blood, of biology, of something that ate and breathed and struggled. He looked at the wreckage around him. The rusted cars, the twisted rebar, the shanties made of garbage. It was ugly. It was asymmetrical. It was rusting. And it was alive. He realized the truth. The perfection of Cybertron was brittle. It shattered under pressure. But this world, this wasteland, it bent, it rotted, it healed. It grew moss on the skeletons of tanks. It put flowers in the barrels of guns. A static-filled image overlay appeared in his HUD. He saw Nora again, but the glitch painted her differently. She wasn't just a human. The wireframe overlay identified her as a prime, not by biology, but by function, a leader, a protector, a survivor of her own apocalypse. She was holding his hand. Her biological fingers were interlaced with his metal ones, soft flesh against hard steel. "You're not scrap," Nora whispered, her voice cutting through the static of the war in his head. "You're the best thing that's landed here in 200 years. You hear me?" B-127 focused. The golden towers of Iacon faded, replaced by the jagged, broken rim of the crater. The sterile smell of ozone was overpowered by the smell of wet dog and ozone. He preferred the wet dog. He didn't want the cold perfection. He wanted the mess. His vocal processor crackled. A surge of power from the stimpack Curie had administered earlier finally hit the audio deck. "I see trees of green." Louis Armstrong. The voice was faint, distorted, skipping like a scratched record. "Red roses, too." Nora froze. She squeezed his hand. Yeah, big guy. We'll find some. I promise." "I see them bloom. For me and you." The audio died. B-127's optics locked onto hers. The blue light steadied. He wasn't hallucinating anymore. He saw the cracks in her armor. He saw the fear in her eyes. He saw the fatal flaw of this world, its fragility. And his programming shifted. He tried to sit up. The pain was absolute, a white noise in his nervous system, but he pushed through it. He had to finish this, not for Prime, not for Cybertron. For the dog, for the woman, for the messy, beautiful Rust. "He's moving!" Piper gasped from the darkness. "Blue, look at his chest." The spark chamber wasn't just glowing, it was spinning. The blue light turned white. He was diverting power. He was pulling everything he had left, life support, memory archives, weapon capacitors, and channeling it into a single final protocol. He looked at Nora one last time. He tapped his chest. "Trust me." The silence inside the machine was louder than the war outside. System alert. Critical mass reached. Weapon capacitors, 12% and falling. Life support, 4%. B-127 ignored the flashing red text. He was deep in the root directory of his own soul. He was rewriting his purpose. He accessed the plasmacaster drivers. Uninstalling. He accessed the Sonic Blaster firmware. Uninstalling. He took the raw, destructive energy stored in his weapon banks. The gigajoules meant to melt tank armor and vaporize stone. And he didn't vent it. He inverted it. He pulled up the scan of the daisy, the yellow flower from Sanctuary. A simple biological algorithm. Carbon, water, sun, chlorophyll. He patched this algorithm into the all-spark resonance frequency. In the physical world, the sound began. It wasn't a roar. It was a hum. A low, resonant vibration that started in the mud and traveled up the bones of everyone standing in the crater. Nora felt it in her teeth. She looked down at B-127. The light leaking from his shattered chest wasn't the erratic, sparking blue of a damaged reactor anymore. It was turning white. A blinding, pure magnesium white. It pulsed with a steady rhythm, slower than a heartbeat, stronger than a drum. Hum! Ah! The sound rose in pitch. It was a harmonic scale, stacking notes on top of each other. A major chord building in the middle of hell. "What is he doing?" Dance shouted, stepping back, his helmet speakers whining with interference. "Readings are off the chart. Is he going critical?" "No," Curie whispered, looking at her scanner, mesmerized. "He is not exploding. He is singing the radiation. Look at the radiation." She held up her Geiger counter. The needle, which had been buried in the red zone for hours, was trembling. It wasn't dropping, but the frantic crack, crack, crack of the static was being smoothed out. The chaotic noise of the atom was being forced into a pattern. But the pattern attracted the moth. From the shadows of the siege engine's wreckage, the Hornet emerged. He had stripped off his heavy armor. He wore only a blackened flight suit and a harness of webbing. He moved like a spider, silent and jagged. In his hand, the Ripper was deactivated, silent. He saw the white light. He smelled the sweet ozone. He didn't see a miracle. He saw a meal that was about to burn itself out. "No!" the Hornet hissed. "Don't you waste it! That's mine!" He sprinted. "Contact!" Nick Valentine yelled, raising his revolver. He fired. Bang! The bullet sparked off the metal debris, missing the warlord. The Hornet was too fast. He leaped over the barricade of junk, landing directly on B-127's chest. Nora lunged for him, but Slag and the other Forged rushed from the darkness, tackling her into the mud. The Hornet straddled the dying robot. He stared into B-127's fading optics. "You don't get to die yet," the Hornet snarled. "Not until I drink." He revved the Ripper. Bzzz! The chainsaw sword screamed to life. The Hornet drove it down two-handed, plunging the diamond teeth blade straight into the gap in B-127's chest plating, inches from the spark chamber. Grind screech. Sparks showered the Hornet's face. Metal flew. B-127 convulsed. The pain was absolute, a physical violation of his core. His back arched, lifting him out of the mud. But he didn't fight back. He didn't transform his hand into a blade. He didn't fire a repulsor blast. He looked at the Hornet. His optics were calm. He reached up with his remaining hand. The Hornet flinched, expecting a crush grip. B-127 didn't grab the warlord's throat. He grabbed the warlord's wrist. He didn't pull the blade out. He pulled it deeper. The Hornet's eyes went wide. "What?" B-127 pulled the Ripper down, severing the last inhibitor lock on his own core. He cracked his own shell open. The white light exploded. It wasn't a flashbang. It was a solid wall of luminance. Ping! The sound reached its zenith. A single crystal-clear note that shattered the glass of the Hornet's goggles. The sound drowned out the Ripper. It drowned out the wind. It drowned out the radiation. For a moment, there was no wasteland. There was no war. There was only the tone. The energy surged out of B-127's chest, traveling up the Ripper blade into the Hornet's arms. The warlord screamed, but he made no sound. His silhouette was swallowed by the white fire. He wasn't burning, he was being overwritten. The pulse expanded. It moved outward in a ring, a shockwave of pure creation. It hit Nora, Dance, Nick, and Piper. It didn't hurt. It passed through them like a warm breeze, smelling of rain and fresh soil. It hit the ground. Where the white light touched the glowing green slime of the crater, the green vanished. The physics of the fallout world, the decay, the rot, the half-life, collided with the physics of the all-spark. B-127's optics went dark. The hum stopped. The world held its breath. The world was silent. Nora gasped, waking up. She was lying on her back. She scrambled up, grabbing her rifle, expecting the Hornet, expecting the mutant, expecting the fire. She froze. Her rifle fell from her hands, thump. She wasn't standing in radioactive mud. She was standing in grass. Thick, vibrant, emerald grass. It grew thigh-high, swaying in a clean breeze. It covered the ash, the debris, the twisted metal of the cars. The green fog was gone. The sky above was clear, a crisp pre-war blue streaked with the pink of a rising sun. Dance stood up nearby. He checked his T-60 helmet display. He tapped the side of it hard. "Malfunction," Dance muttered, his voice shaking. "Sensors are reading 0. 0 radiation. Background radiation is lower than the Institute clean room." Nick Valentine pulled himself out of a patch of wildflowers, yellow daisies that shouldn't exist. He looked at his mechanical hand, then at the flowers. "It ain't a malfunction, Paladin," Nick rasped. "Look around. The big guy didn't just scrub the floor. He renovated the whole damn house." Nora spun around. B-127? In the center of the crater, Where the radioactive pool used to be, there was now a mound of blooming vines. Lying in the center of it was the Titan. B-127 was gray. The vibrant yellow paint was gone, bleached white by the energy discharge. His armor was dull, looking like unpolished lead. He sat slumped against the rock wall, head bowed, his optics dark. The gap in his chest where the hornet had stabbed him was no longer a wound. It was a planter. Vines of ivy and morning glory grew out of his spark chamber, wrapping around his neck, weaving through his fingers. He had become a part of the landscape, a statue of a fallen knight in a garden of his own making. "Bee?" Nora whispered. She walked through the tall grass, pushing aside the flowers. She reached him. She touched his knee. Cold. Not the cool metal of a resting machine. The deep, heavy cold of inert matter. Dogmeat trotted up. He didn't whine. He sniffed the gray metal, then sneezed. He curled up on the robot's foot, resting his head on the gray toe. "Is he?" Piper asked, walking up behind them. She had lost her hat. Her press badge was dangling. She didn't finish the sentence. "He is empty," Curie said softly. She scanned the body with her medical tool. No energy signature, no magnetic field. The core is gone. He converted all his mass energy into this. She gestured to the garden. Chlorophyll, oxygen, life. Nora looked at the garden. It stretched to the rim of the crater and beyond, a circle of life cut out of the glowing hellscape. Then she saw the hornet, or what was left of him. He was still kneeling on B-127's chest, but he wasn't human anymore. The energy pulse had caught him at ground zero. The warlord who wanted to consume the metal had been consumed by it. He was a statue of fused pyrite and crystal. His armor had calcified, turning into a jagged geometric rock formation. The Ripper in his hand had bloomed. The metal blade transformed into a spiraling branch of silver, sprouting metal leaves. He was a monument to his own greed, forever locked in the moment of his strike, now just a trellis for the ivy. "He got his wish," Nick muttered, looking at the crystallized warlord. He became part of the machine. Nora climbed up the gray legs of the Autobot. She sat on his knee, looking into his dark, lifeless face. She remembered the song, "I see trees of green." "You did it," she whispered, her voice choking. "You stubborn, beautiful idiot. You fixed the world." She leaned her forehead against his cold metal cheek. Silence stretched out, peaceful and heavy. Then a sound. Click. It came from the dashboard of the yellow micro coupe. Wait. There was no car. B-127 was the robot. The sound came from inside the gray chest, deep inside the vines. Whir. Click. It was the sound of a cassette tape deck trying to engage. Mechanical, analog, struggling. Nora pulled back. "Did you hear that?" "Residual capacitor discharge," Dance said, though he stepped closer. "Muscle spasms." Click. Hiss. A faint, static-filled audio clip ghosted from the speakers behind the vines. I'll be right here." It wasn't a broadcast. It was a local file. The vines in the chest cavity moved. Something small, round, and metallic rolled out of the open spark chamber. It tumbled down the gray armor and landed in Nora's lap. It wasn't the spark. It wasn't the matrix. It was a holotape. A standard yellow Robco holotape. But written on the side, scratched into the plastic with a laser-fine point, were glyphs, Cybertronian glyphs, and below them, a clumsy hand-scratched translation in English. For blue. Nora picked it up. Her hands trembled. She looked at her Pip-Boy. She looked at the tape. "He left a note," she breathed. She slotted the tape into her Pip-Boy. Ka-chunk. Loading data. Audio file. Found. Goodbye.wav. The static cleared. And for the first time, B-127 spoke, not with a song, not with a movie quote, with his own voice. It was young, brave, and a little bit scared. If you are hearing this, then I am offline. My name is B-127. But you can call me Bumblebee. Nora closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. The sun broke fully over the crater rim, bathing the gray statue and the yellow flowers in golden light. Nora sat on the knee of the gray giant. She tapped the play button on her Pip-Boy. The audio hissed, "My name is B-127, but you can call me Bumblebee." The voice was young. It didn't sound like a war machine. It sounded like a kid who had seen too much, yet still believed in the ending of the movie. I was sent here to establish a base, to find a safe harbor for my people. I looked for mountains. I looked for caves. I looked for energy. A pause on the tape. The sound of a radio dial spinning in the background. Then stopping. But a home isn't the soil. It's the spark. I watched you. I watched you fight for a dog. I watched you share water. I watched you build walls out of garbage to keep the monsters out. Nick Valentine lowered his head, tipping his fedora to the statue. Piper wiped her eyes, smiling sadly. Dance stood at attention, a rigid salute to a warrior who had outclassed them all. My world is dead. It burned because we forgot how to build. We only knew how to fight. I see the same fire here, but I also see the green trying to come back. The audio quality shifted, a deep mechanical thrumming, the sound of his core spinning up for the final discharge. Prime told me that freedom is the right of all sentient beings, but freedom means nothing if you can't breathe. So I'm changing the mission parameters. I am not the scout anymore. I am the seed. Protect the garden, Blue. Keep the music playing. And if any of my friends look to the stars and find this place, tell them I am still here, in the roots. Bumblebee, signing off. Click. The tape ended. Then one last sound clip played. Not a voice. A song. Don't you forget about me. Simple minds faded into the static. Nora sat there for a long time. The wind rustled the ivy growing out of the statue's chest. "The seed," Curie whispered, looking at the vibrant ecosystem spreading visibly toward the horizon. "He did not just fix the crater. The spores, they are airborne. The wind is carrying them. He has started a chain reaction." Preston Garvey's voice crackled over the long-range radio. "General, you there? We see it. From the castle walls, the sky to the south. It's turning blue." Nora looked at the statue. She looked at the crystallization of the hornet, a warning to those who would take instead of give. "Preston," Nora said into her wrist, "get the settlers, get the Minutemen, bring the seeds, bring the shovels. We're securing the site?" "No," Nora said, standing up and placing a hand on the gray metal cheek of her friend. "We're building a city, Setsen." Days later, scavengers and settlers arrive at the edge of the crater. They don't wear hazmat suits. They wear ore. They touch the grass with trembling hands. Weeks later, shacks are dismantled. Proper structures are built, not from scrap, but from the petrified wood of the glowing sea, now revitalized. The children of Atom. They are changed. They no longer worship the division. They wear garlands of yellow flowers. They tend the vines growing on the giant. They are the keepers of the garden. The Brotherhood of Vertibird lands. Elder Maxon steps out. He looks at the statue. He doesn't order it confiscated. He orders a permanent honor guard. A squad of paladins stands watch at the rim, protecting the tech saint. The tribute, Sturgis and Tinker Tom work together. They can't fix the robot, but they can honor him. They paint the gray feet of the statue, not the whole thing, just the feet, bright, vibrant Camaro yellow. The statue of Bumblebee sits in the town square covered in blooming vines. Children play on his legs. A Brahmin grazes on the lush grass near his hand. Nora walks through the square. She is older, scarred, but she looks peaceful. She carries a basket of produce, real mutation-free corn and tomatoes. She stops at the statue. She places a holotape on the shrine built at his feet. There is a radio set up there. Powered by a solar panel, it plays 24/7. Currently playing Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. Nora smiles. She looks at the chest of the statue. Deep inside the thick ivy, hidden from sight but audible if you press your ear against the metal. Thump, thump. A faint rhythmic vibration. Not a core, but an echo. A ghost in the machine, humming along to the track. Nora pats the metal leg. Roll out, partner. She walks away into the sunlight. The camera pans up past the moss-covered head of the Autobot, past the crystallized hornet, up into the clear, radiation-free blue sky of the Commonwealth.